Hi, I'm Andy Miocza and you're watching A News. Here are the headlines. Head of Russia's nuclear protection forces killed by a bomb in Moscow. EU pledges €1 billion to help Syrian refugees in Turkey. Ankara pushes for improved relations with Brussels. Rescue workers race against time to reach survivors of cyclone in Mayotte. Thank you for tuning in. Russian General Igor Kirillov has been killed in a bomb attack in Moscow. Sources in Kiev have told multiple outlets that Ukrainian security services are behind the attack. Ukraine is yet to officially comment.
On Tuesday morning, a bomb explosion outside an apartment building in Moscow killed Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, the head of Russia's nuclear, biological, and chemical protection troops. The Russian Investigative Committee has confirmed that an explosion device was planted near the entrance of the residential building on Ryazansky Prospect, where Kirillov and his assistant were killed. According to a committee representative, the incident is being treated as a murder, a terrorist act, and involves the legal circulation of weapons and ammunition. Kirillov's death follows recent accusations against him from Ukraine, which charged him in absentia for alleged chemical weapon use. Local residents heard the blast. Some shared their reactions to the incident that unfolded outside their building.
At first we thought that cement might have been unloaded or something similar, but the blast was so loud that it did not seem like construction works. It was very scary.
I only knew him from the media. I had no idea he lived in our block. I saw him on TV only. We knew his car though, because we saw it. They use the electric scooter, and there is a scooter parking there near the entrance. So who knew? At the moment you see a lot of police, but usually everything is open. Anybody can go in and out, drive in and out.
Authorities have not confirmed the exact circumstances behind Kirillov's death, though the Russian Investigative Committee is pursuing all leads.
Our Dasha Chernyshova brings more on the Moscow bombing from the Russian capital.
Moscow has confirmed the death of one of its top generals and his aide in a blast that took place in the Russian capital on Tuesday. General Igor Kirillov was in charge of nuclear, chemical and biological protection forces. Preliminary information suggests the explosive device was planted in an electric scooter outside the apartment building. The bomb might have been detonated remotely and contained an equivalent to some 200 grams of TNT. The Russian Investigative Committee has opened a criminal case and is treating the blast as an act of terrorism. The investigators and forensic experts have been working at the site. Kirillov was regularly giving briefings accusing Kiev and the West of running secret networks of biolabs that were developing banned chemical agents and perpetrating against Russia. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Kirillov has been, quote, systemically exposing the crimes of the Anglo-Saxons for many years. And Russian Security Council Deputy Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said on Tuesday that Kiev was behind the assassination and promised retaliation. He also added that Kiev realizes the inevitability of a military defeat, and the assassination, quote, demonstrates its agony. Russian officials also said that what General Kirillov was talking about and what evidence he gave turned out to be painful and threatening for someone. Ukrainian prosecutors on Monday sentenced Kirillov in absentia over what they called war crimes. Also on Monday, a day before the assassination, President Vladimir Putin hailed 2024 as a landmark year for his operation in Ukraine, saying his troops had the upper hand across the entire front line. Putin said on Monday that in 2024, Russian troops took control over 189 settlements in the operations area. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow for A News.
Over in Ankara, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen pledged an additional 1 billion euros to support Syrian refugees in Turkey during a meeting with the country's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The talks that focused on Syria's transition of power saw Erdogan calling for a tangible and immediate improvement in relations between Ankara and Brussels.
During the crucial discussions between Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Syria's reconstruction and refugee management issue, Erdogan stressed the importance of establishing an inclusive administration in Syria that prioritizes sovereignty and territorial integrity. He called the European Union to step up its support, calling for substantial investments that would facilitate the voluntary return of millions of Syrian refugees who have sought safety in Turkey.
We expect the European Union to diversify its support, which it has provided to lighten our country's burden to ease voluntary returns.
President Ursula von der Leyen, representing the European Commission, committed the EU to long-term support for Syria, emphasizing a focus on reconstruction and humanitarian aid. She highlighted the EU's commitment to supporting basic services like healthcare and education, while addressing migration and border management challenges.
With HTS and others. I am very pleased to announce today that an additional 1 billion euros for 2024 is on its way. This will support, among others, healthcare and education of refugees in Turkey. It will continue to contribute to migration and border management, including voluntary returns to Syrian refugees. And
Erdogan also reaffirmed commitment to eradicating terrorism, targeting groups like Islamic State and the PKK. Turkish president emphasized the nation's role as the only NATO member that has successfully defeated these militants on the ground.
There's no place for either Daesh nor the PKK and its derivatives in the future of our region.
Von der Leyen maintained a tough stance on diplomacy, declaring that the EU would not engage with the Assad government. She emphasized that sanctions relief would only be considered if substantial progress was made toward a peaceful transition and reconciliation in Syria. This high-level meeting underscores a pivotal moment in Syria's future, balancing urgent humanitarian needs with the goal of regional stability, reconstruction, and a sustainable path for millions of refugees to return home, all while navigating the complex political dynamics of Syria's internal and external challenges.
US President-elect Donald Trump said Ankara will hold the key to what happens in Syria following the toppling of Bashar al-Assad. Making his first comments on how he views the NATO allies' role in post-conflict Syria, Trump praised what he described as Turkey's major military force. The country was the main backer of opposition groups that overthrew Assad, ending a 13-year-long civil war. Over the weekend, Turkey reopened its embassy in the Syrian capital.
I think we have to get on with our lives. We'll have to see what happens. But right now, Syria has a lot of, there's a lot of indefinites. Nobody knows what's going to happen with Syria. But I think Turkey is going to hold the key to Syria, actually. I don't think you've heard that from anybody else, but I've been pretty good at predicting.
Meanwhile, residents of Damascus are rushing to bakeries as limits on bread purchases have been eased, bringing some relief to families facing food shortages.
Bakeries in Damascus reopened after the country's opposition-led transitional government eased daily purchase limits on flatbread, a staple food for Syrians. Under the previous system, residents were allowed to buy only 2 packs of bread per day using smart cards. Now, that limit has been raised to 4 packs, providing some relief to families. However, supply shortages persist and long lines continue outside bakeries, with some vendors still restricting purchases to 1 or 2 packs per person. authorities are now focused on protecting Syria's small wheat reserves and seeking flour imports to address the shortages. The bread crisis comes amidst years of conflict that have devastated Syria's economy and infrastructure. Despite this effort, large crowds at bakeries reflect the urgent need for a stable food supply amidst the country's fragile situation.
Still in Damascus, the citizens are facing soaring transportation costs as severe fuel shortages continue to disrupt daily life.
Transportation in Damascus has become a daily struggle. Syrians say fuel shortage, both diesel and gasoline, have driven prices to unprecedented levels, paralyzing movement across the CET.
Why has it become expensive? Because we cannot secure diesel. The diesel has paralyzed our movement. If diesel was provided, the situation of passengers would be normal and very good.
The rising costs hit passengers hardest. Amina Al-Reis says her commute has quadrupled in price.
Travel has become more expensive. I came with 43,000 Syrian pounds and now it is 150.
Taxi drivers also face challenges with limited fuel availability. Drivers say prices fluctuate unpredictably. While fuel remains scarce, passengers and drivers alike are left grappling with uncertainty and rising expenses in a city still rebuilding after years of conflict. The transportation crisis in Damascus continues, leaving many waiting for solutions to ease their daily burden.
Elsewhere in the Middle East, relatives of Israeli hostages and activists protested in Tel Aviv, calling for a ceasefire and the release of all hostages held in Gaza. They fear the government may agree to a partial deal, leaving some behind.
Relatives of Israeli hostages and activists protested in Tel Aviv, demanding a ceasefire and a release of all 100 hostages held in Gaza. They marched to Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party headquarters, fearing the government may only agree to a partial deal, leaving some hostages behind.
We cannot make any selections between old people, young people, or whatever. Everybody should come home as soon as possible, and the deal should be, we cannot push it too much time. We need to make it in about few weeks, because if we're going to wait a little bit more time, probably all the people that survive over there so many times, 438 days, we're going to bring all of them in a packages, and we don't want it. We want to bring the people that survive over there alive.
Defense Minister Israel Katz suggested a deal could return all hostages, including U.S. citizens. However, a Western diplomat said any agreement would likely be limited, involving a short pause in fighting and the release of only a few hostages.
Unfortunately, our Prime Minister have other political reasons to do a deal which can result in the death of the hostages that are left behind. We think Israel should go for a deal for all the hostages and to end the war in Gaza.
Efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. to secure truce and a hostage release continue, but have yet to succeed. Previous talks failed due to disagreements over Israel's demands and Hamas' rejection of a short-term ceasefire.
In the United States, a student opened fire at a private Christian school in the state of Wisconsin, injuring 6 people and killing a teacher and a teenage student. The 15-year-old attacker was found dead at the scene.
In the latest shooting to shake a US campus, the suspect, a teenage student, killed a fellow student and a teacher at the Wisconsin school before being found dead at the scene. The incident, which took place at Abundant Life Christian School in the state capital of Madison, injured more than 6 people, including children.
Of the 6 injured and taken to local hospitals, 2 students remain in critical condition. Their injuries are life-threatening. A teacher and 3 other students were taken to area hospitals with non-life-threatening injuries. 2 of those victims, 2 of those survivors, have been released from the hospital. So that is an update.
The shooter, identified as Natalie Rupno, also known as Samantha, reportedly turned the gun on herself after the attack. Officials say her family is cooperating with the investigation, but the motive behind the violence remains unclear. The school, which serves around 400 students from kindergarten to 12th grade, is now reuniting families.
The reunification of students and their loved ones who survived this incident is complete. All student survivors have been reunified with their parents. We're still in the process of reunifying some of our staff, our teachers who selflessly stayed back to make sure our kids were okay.
While rare, school shootings involving female perpetrators account for just 3% of such incidents in the United States. For now, Madison mourns a devastating loss as authorities continue to investigate. The epidemic of shootings has impacted both public and private schools in urban, suburban, and rural communities. US President Joe Biden offered his condolences to the victims of a school shooting in Wisconsin and urged Congress to pass tougher gun control laws.
As more details emerge on the school shooting in the United States, for the latest, we go to our Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas.
Police in Madison are right now working to establish a motive for this attack. They are interviewing friends and family of the suspected shooter, and the police chief telling CNN that a manifesto of some sort may have been left behind with one of her friends, which could offer some major clues as to why this 15-year-old allegedly opened fire in a classroom on Monday. Authorities say it was a second-grade student who called police to report the shooting at the Abundant Life Christian School. So we're talking about a child around 7 or 8 years old. When officers arrived, they found quite a horrid scene, a number of people bleeding out from gunshot wounds. And police say that one teacher and a teenage student were killed in the attack. 6 others were injured, including 2 students who remain hospitalized in what is described as life-threatening situations. The concern, of course, is that the death toll will continue to rise. Authorities say the suspected shooter, identified as Natalie Rupno, was also found dead at the scene, apparently from a self-inflicted gun wound. Now, it is extremely rare for these types of attacks to be carried out by females. Studies show just 3% of mass shootings are perpetrated by females, and it does not appear at this point that Rupno had a criminal history. And authorities are trying to figure out where the handgun used in this attack came from. The police chief says it's unclear if her parents owned the firearm or if they were negligent in storing it safely. If that is found to be the case, they could be charged in this attack, something that we have seen happen to the parents of some mass shooters in recent years. President Joe Biden has condemned this shooting as shocking, and he has once again called on Congress to pass stricter gun laws, something that is very unlikely to happen under incoming President Donald Trump. In fact, he has vowed to roll back new gun regulations like expanded background checks, which were put in place under the Biden administration. According to a CNN school shooting database, this is now the 83rd school shooting in the U.S. this year, the most since CNN started keeping records nearly 20 years ago. And this time it happened at a small Christian school during what was meant to be the last week of classes before Christmas break. Tony Waterman for A News in Austin, Texas.
Over in Mayotte, rescuers are racing against time as hundreds are feared dead after the Mayotte Cyclone hit the archipelago. Large areas of the French island territory remain inaccessible.
Cyclone Mayotte, which was the strongest to hit the Indian Ocean islands in nearly a century, caused widespread destruction in Mayotte. Emergency workers are currently scrambling to find survivors and clear blocked roads. Despite their efforts, large areas remain inaccessible, complicating relief work. The disaster has left the island in a state of shock, French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau arrived to the island to assess the situation, acknowledging that it would take days to determine the true scale of the disaster. The French Interior Ministry stated that the death toll is difficult to estimate at this stage, but several hundred, possibly even thousands, are feared dead.
Without a doubt, we have to start thinking about reconstruction very quickly. We are, of course, still in an emergency, but we must very quickly plan for reconstruction.
As the region battles the aftermath, humanitarian aid has begun to arrive. The Red Cross dispatched an initial shipment of 30 tons of emergency supplies, including tools, showels, blankets, solar lamps and hygiene kits. However, the logistics of delivering aid are complex due to the damaged infrastructure.
Fortunately, we have 250 Red Cross workers on the ground, 150 staff and 100 volunteers. These people have also been shocked by what happened. Some have lost everything, including our local director, the territorial director of the Red Cross, who lost his house. So these people need to be able to get back on their feet on a family level, so that they can